Good afternoon and welcome. It's great to see everyone here today. My name is Bill Paulus and I'm the Associate Vice President for Facilities Management here on the Twin Cities campus, and thank you all for coming out today. I'd like to just mention that this town hall is being recorded for those who can't join us, so they'll be able to view this at a time more convenient for them. Today we're talking about climate action planning. What is a climate action plan? Why is it important? What are we going to do on this campus for climate action planning? You've come to the right place. That's what this town hall is all about. Here's the agenda we have for you today. We have quite a few things we'd like to cover. So we have a couple presentations, a panel discussion, and some time for Q&A at the end. So we will jump right in. But first, let me talk just a minute about context. The President's System-Wide Strategic Plan, MPACT 2025, includes a commitment to build a fully sustainable future. And we have several goals that we're trying to achieve in this area. I'm very happy to see sustainability as a top priority for our university leadership. The second goal directs us to develop governance coordination for sustainability initiatives. Here's how we're doing that. For the Twin Cities campus, we've assembled a committee of faculty, students, and staff, and this is the Twin Cities Sustainability Committee. We kicked this committee off last August. We have several members of the committee who will be on the panel that you'll see in just a few minutes. For the members in the audience today, if you're a member of the Twin Cities Campus Sustainability Committee, can you please stand just for a minute and be recognized so people will know who you are and maybe can approach you at the end. So thank you. Thank you all for serving on this very important committee. When our committee first began, we focused on completing a self-assessment of our sustainability program using the STARS system as established by the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, or ASHE. ASHE empowers higher education faculty, administrators, staff, and students to be effective change agents and drivers of sustainability innovation. The University of Minnesota has been members of ASHE for many years. The STARS framework includes academics, engagement, operations, planning, and administration. Completing this STARS assessment is also on the MPACT 2025 scorecard, and we're on track to submit our self-assessment by the end of this summer. Back to MPACT 2025. We have a clear goal to establish a climate action plan, or CAP, and that is what we're talking about today. Our committee is going to be turning our attention from the STARS assessment to the climate action planning activities. The CAP includes operational components like campus emissions and mitigation strategies, which you might expect, and it also includes academics, research, and outreach activities. To cover some of these areas, I'm going to turn the presentation over to our committee co-chair, Brian Burr, who serves as the Dean of College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences.
Thank you, Bill. And as Bill said, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's a lovely day outside, so I'm assuming that many people are out there on the campus enjoying that rather than this climate-controlled arena. But thanks, Bill. As Bill said, I'll just be brief. I am the co-chair. I'm delighted to do that. And as part of this, as he was talking through STARS and some of the activities so far, it's been about the activities of the campus per se, the operations, the facilities, the buildings, the transportation issues, and so on. As we move forward, this will expand out to kind of our mission as a land-grant university to look at what are the public impacts of this, how do we educate the next generation, develop and draw together research programs to do that, and really think also about extension and outreach as we try to bring the broader community that we are in into this climate action planning. So that's really, as an academic person within the University of Minnesota as a dean, that becomes my role to help facilitate and identify those processes along with the committee. And so we'll probably just be kicking that off more as we get through the STARS assessment. So as that's completed and we get that moving, we'll be moving to more of those as we go along. And as Bill noted a little bit, I'll just add one bullet on there that is part of the MPACT 2023. There is a mentor section part of that. And as mentor sections goes, those are collaborative aspects across the university and across the system to work on this. And one of those is exactly this: demonstrate straight ride into the world leadership in sustainability and environmental teaching, research, and convening power. As part of that, there's actually a component to that that's about food, agriculture, and natural resources, and how do we bring together those aspects to this, which fits, of course, with CFANS. But one of the things about the University of Minnesota that's unique is we're one of the few, about 5, comprehensive universities in the country that span from agricultural sciences to College of Science and Engineering to health and medicine, public health. And we know that all those are aspects of climate adaptation and climate change occurring. And so our ability to draw together across those discipline areas and across those areas really allows us to excel at leading the country and globally into areas we're talking about with the Climate Action Plan. I'll also note that we have a unique array, and I'll go back to 2011, when there was an assessment of what are the programs we have related to sustainability identification of those. There were 600 roughly courses at that time. So there were 70,000 student credit hours that were given at that time. Since that time, we've had tremendous investments in that. For example, we have at that time, we did have the Institute on the Environment. We have the Institute on the Environment, we have the Natural Resources Research Institute. We have the Sea Grant opportunities at Duluth. We have a Water Resources Center and Water Resource Sciences degrees. So we've added tremendously for that. So a big part of the starting point will be doing an assessment of where are we at in our academic mission regarding advancing climate adaptation within the university. And our goal is to, of course, grow those activities and expand upon that. So we're really excited about moving that forward. I will talk about one other piece that has come up that we'd really like to advance is this idea that the university has been at the forefront of, that our underrepresented BIPOC populations, low-income populations are disproportionately affected by climate adaptation. And as a university with public health and our sciences and environment, we have the opportunity to really advance our diversity component of this, which was just really absent in the previous climate adaptation plan that we had at the university. So we're excited to embark on those. With that, that's sort of my role in the background of this. Appreciate working with the team here that's been a key part of this in the committee, and we'll look forward to moving that ahead. I'm also delighted, I have the great pleasure of introducing Dr. Heidi Roop. She is, I'm pleased to say, a faculty member in the College of Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resource Sciences. She's also an extension specialist within her role there, so she does both of what I was talking about, the research, the education, and the extension part of this. We end up crossing paths across the state at various times in various venues in canoes, for example. Fake canoes, I'll point out, not a real canoe on the water. But her extension programs combine cutting-edge climate science and effective science communication to increase the use and integration of climate change information on decision-making. Again, having that impact in her work that's going on there. Her efforts are focused in her forthcoming book, The Climate Action Handbook, that outlines in a highly visual format, everyday ways we can contribute to collective and individual climate solutions. I think it's like the shameless commerce division. Buy her book. That's a simple version. So,
I don't have a 9-month appointment,
so do buy the book 3 times, for those, 1 for each month. So with that, Heidi, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Deeper. We clearly don't have any fun over in CFANS where, you can wrestle your leadership, for better or worse. I am pre-tenure, so stay tuned on whether that's a good strategy or not. I have the challenge and the pleasure of providing sort of the climate context. So part of why are we here today, what is the urgency of action, and what's the imperative that the university engage in climate action planning and continue to build on this legacy of proactive management towards both reducing emissions and preparing for the climate changes we know we've set in motion. So I was tasked with sort of 15 minutes to kind of frame the problem and sort of frame the solution space to inspire the conversation that will follow with our panelists. So I am an earth scientist by training. I actually had grand aspirations when I went to university to be a diplomat. I wanted to double major in international relations and Spanish, and of course at the age of 18 I knew exactly what I wanted to do and exactly what my career would be and exactly where I would be having a job, and that was in Ecuador. I was going to be an ambassador in Ecuador. Clearly, I am not that now. However, I got a little sidetracked because I fell in love with earth science and understanding how the planet works and critically how it's changing and how we know that the climate that we're living in today is profoundly different from that of the past. And so that has really driven my research career to present. And now I have sort of come full circle. And a big part of my job is actually being an ambassador for science and an ambassador for the use of science in decision making. And so that's the sort of context that I bring to you today, but is also what is at the foundation of the program that I have the privilege of leading here at the University of Minnesota called the Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership. And we are a jointly held program between CFANS and Extension, and we really work to bring research and capacity onto the landscape and use collaboration as a central tenet to actually achieving climate resilience across the state and the greater Midwest region. So my work predominantly is right now is centered around preparedness, adaptation. I'll talk to you a little bit about what that looks like. And also have the privilege to participate in the new center that the Institute on the Environment is hosting called the Midwest Climate Adaptation Science Center, which is really focused on natural resource management. So and I'm in a great position to be able to really focus on preparation, and I'm thinking about knowledge to action. How do we move science into the decision space so that we're actually making the progress we know is needed, and quite urgently. So it's in this context that we and I think about climate change. And so many of you, and even in some of this conversation, right, climate change is often referred to as sort of the challenge of our time. It's hard to say that right now when we can look at our phones and look at the world around us and understand that we are navigating enormous challenges as a global society. And climate change is in the background of all of this, but also at the forefront of really important societal challenges, including food security and access, our safety, and of course our individual well-being even here on this campus. And so while it is most certainly a challenge and one that is sort of foregrounded and backgrounded in the myriad of societal challenges we face, it's also posing global society a real opportunity. And that's really where we want us to lean in as we think about this plan and where we show up as an institution in service of both preventing the problem from getting worse and preparing for the impacts that we know are going to stem for the things, quite frankly, we've already committed to. And so the real question now is, will we embrace this opportunity? Will we embrace it as a community here in this room? Will we embrace it as a community in this geography, in this state, in this region, and globally? And so the real question for you as we think about it is, how do you contribute as an individual to this collective conversation? And critically, how do you also move forward as an individual, living the life you want, pursuing the career you want, but with climate foregrounded in the work that you do? So it's showing up both as an individual and as a collective. So I have, this opportunity, and of course we have to frame the challenge. I've been asked to frame the challenge, and I'm hoping we can come full circle with the opportunity, but that's really where we're going to be leaning on all you to help articulate what is the opportunity for us as we think about this climate action plan. So instead of a whole ton of slides, I thought what I'd do is look to my peers and colleagues that have contributed to the most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. There are a series of reports, not all are represented here, but this is a Cliff Note version of what we understand about Earth's changing climate, both what's changing and how we know it's changing, and also critically that we need to adapt. So here's the context. It's us, it's here, it's everywhere. This is a question that comes up a lot. There are no winners with climate change. There are bigger losers, but there are no winners, let's be clear. We've committed to change. The more we emit, the worse it gets. It's pretty simple physics, actually. We must reduce risks through adaptation, and critically, we still have a choice, but we have to make that choice and act urgently. So I'm going to just give you a quick little bit of information under each one of those bullets, and then we'll contextualize the conversation to move forward. So it's us. Scientists like myself really don't like to say words like unequivocal, but sometimes the science warrants it. And in this case, at the end of 2021, when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its most recent assessment on the physical science basis of climate change, hundreds of scientists and thousands of peer-reviewed papers point to this very fact. It is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land masses. And the rate of warming that we are observing meaning that rate of warming that we are all living through together currently is unprecedented in at least the last 2,000 years. And I add that tidbit because that's really the earth science research that I do, is sort of last 2,000 year climate. So I can tell you that the records we generate very clearly point to this reality. We also know that it's here. We are able to establish clear connections between human-caused warming, human-caused climate change, and the changing patterns of extremes that we are living through today. In fact, right now, there are communities feeling events that have been amplified by a warming world, by heat waves. We've seen that in our own country. The Pacific Northwest last year experienced heat waves that were unprecedented, in fact, impossible in the absence of human-caused warming, heavy precipitation events, droughts, and tropical cyclones. And again, some of this is happening like literally right now around the globe. People are being displaced from their homes and losing their lives and their cultures as a consequence. So we know we've warmed the planet. We have measured, in fact, that the global average temperature has increased by 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 1800s. And we know that 2011 to 2020 was more likely than not the warmest record in roughly 125,000 years ago. That's known as the Eemian for those geology nerds amongst me in the crowd. When we say here, talking about global average change doesn't really mean a lot, but when we say here, we mean Minnesota. Minnesota is warmed on average by 3 degrees Fahrenheit over that same time period, as measured by weather stations directly in our state, distributed across the landscape, potentially collected by you or some of your family members. These observations have been long-standing. We're a state with great privilege of long-running observational records, and we know and have measured directly that our state is warming. Of course, we are above average in most ways here. This is maybe not one we want to be proud of, but we are above average as well, beyond the global mean. We also see signals of a warming world and a changing climate everywhere. And I think this quote kind of hits this home. Why is that relevant? Weather and climate extremes are causing economic and societal impacts across national boundaries through supply chains, markets, natural resource flows, across the water, energy, and food sectors. If you don't see yourself or something you care about in this quote, we might need to have a conversation. But it's everywhere, and it's in our lives, and it's in the things that we take for granted every day. We live in a globalized society. The last 2 years have made that abundantly clear, that we are interconnected and reliant upon one another. So even if impacts in one region are not as bad as another, we still bear the consequences and, quite frankly, the costs of climate impacts that are emerging in other geographies, even if it's not the one that you're currently or we are currently sharing. We also know in the US that a warming world is costing us significant amounts of money. This is weather and climate disasters. So the NOAA tracks large weather and climate-related disasters across the nation, and in 2021, our country withstood $20 billion disasters, and maybe not withstood is not the right word, we experienced and felt the consequences of $20 billion disasters. Over $145 billion in damages, and 688 direct deaths as reported. This is traditionally an undercount. And of course, these are billion-dollar disasters, so those $100 million disasters are not reflected in this number. Main point is, we're paying the costs of a warming world now, and we know the costs will only increase in the future. In fact, in our region, we expect a 30% increase in winter and spring precipitation by mid-century, by the end of the century across the Midwest, so that's here. And we expect annual average damages from increased flood risks alone to exceed $500 million by mid-century, 2050. So that's per year, 500 million. So this is a significant impact. And again, I'm talking about the Midwest region, but this also means this little city that we share, that of course is connected to a much bigger city and a county and a state. And if we don't operate in, right, there are these nested scales, but our resilience and preparedness are sort of meaningless if the world's few steps away from us are not. And so this is systems-based collaboration and systems-based thinking. So as we endeavor to articulate our priorities for a climate action plan, it behooves us to look to our neighbors, maybe Hennepin County, for example, and Ramsey County, who also have plans and priorities, and community members who have articulated their climate action goals. So just as a reminder that we don't live in isolation and that of course we are better together, and so we need to think about how our system, our community, fits into the broader communities in which we engage and quite frankly are part of. We know we've committed to change. So even if we turned off the tap today, which someone like me would love to do, but it of course knows that's not possible, even if we stopped producing the source of the problem, that is heat trapping gases like carbon dioxide and methane, even if we were to halt that to zero, the planet would still continue to warm. With molecules like carbon dioxide, I like to say once you emit, you commit. And so unless we physically remove it from the atmosphere, it will continue to trap heat. So in that way, we have committed to change. So we know then that we have to reduce the risks that stem from that warming through preparing, through adapting. Adaptation can come in many forms and is needed across human and natural systems. This can be things like roads and bridges and transit systems that are designed for the climate of the future rather than the climate of the past. This can be a critical thought about our water and our waste management systems. This can be thinking about responsive and equitable health systems that are resilient to the impacts, but also able to operate in moments of great need within our communities. And of course, this means thinking critically about how we manage and understand natural resources, our ecosystems, and preserving natural and cultural resources and identities. It's no small task, let me say. It's a long list. Climate change is everywhere, and climate opportunities are therefore also everywhere. So we know the more we emit, the worse it gets. And this is captured pretty clearly in this graph. I've tried to make it more simple than the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change by giving you a thermometer and a range of options. It's a lot more sophisticated than this, but not really. So if we choose to emit more emissions than we are currently, this would be not the direction we would like to go, nor the direction we are planning on going, nor the direction that global climate commitments say we're headed in. But if we continue to emit high amounts of greenhouse gases, we could warm the planet by as much as 5.4 to 10.3 Fahrenheit degrees above the pre-industrial average. Let's not do that, please. More likely, given current commitments from global governments, including our own, is we are likely to end up somewhere in the middle here with a planet that warms somewhere around 4 degrees to 6 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial average. Let's just remind one another that we have set an ambitious global target to limit warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius and hopefully 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. So even with our most ambitious plans, we're not there. But we still choose. So the policy targets we've set are likely to be exceeded, and all signs point to us heading in that direction unless we urgently ramp up our commitment and critically our deployment of all the tools in our toolbox we know we need to decarbonize our energy system, basically our lives. So we know we need to reduce emissions, and we know the time to do that is now. And ultimately, as we think about a climate action plan, how we feel climate change broadly depends on how well we balance this equation. It's quite simple. How well we prevent further warming, we do that through mitigation, the reduction of greenhouse gases, and then critically how well we prepare for the changes we know we've set in motion. And unless we consider both of those things and think about strategic investments in both and provide care and thought to both of those pieces, we will not have climate-ready ecosystems, economies, cultures, you name it. Insert the thing you care about on the other side of this equation. And unless we are able to not necessarily balance it, but consider how to add pieces so that we can move forward both in preparing for the problem and preventing it from getting worse. That's really what we have to do. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said this very clearly, and I will conclude with that slide after providing just the quick context to move us into the conversation. So when I say prevention or mitigation, what I mean and what we talk about is the reduction in the sources or enhancements of sinks. This means basically increasing the potential for us to remove greenhouse gases we've put in the atmosphere, right? Those carbon dioxide molecules can be up there for a long, long time. And so in that way, if we want to try to reverse the commitments we've made, we actually have to enhance our ability to remove it from the atmosphere. And so that is basically mitigation. There are a multitude of forms of mitigation, and we can talk more about that. But the really fortunate thing, I put this slide up here acknowledging that you probably can't really read it. But unlike most problems, We know exactly the source of the problem. And not only that, we can unpack it. We can, in great detail, this is probably not accurate, some of this is self-reporting, right? But on the whole, we know where the greenhouse gases are coming from. We have solutions we can deploy across all sectors. And we know the source of the problem. We are not guessing about where there is impact and where there is opportunity. Now, the question then becomes about how we scale solutions, how we build political will, and how we direct resources to actually addressing the issues. So we know that we have a lot of emissions that come from our energy sector. We've made huge progress here at the university in that piece, but ultimately know that we know the source of the problem. And so therefore we know how we can deploy solutions. And so mitigation takes a lot of forms. This is thinking about electrifying our vehicles and our bus fleets, for example. Thinking about how to advance technologies to enable us to decarbonize hard to decarbonize sectors like aviation and cargo ships. This means improving the health of our soil so we can remove carbon from the atmosphere. This means thinking about biofuels and other opportunities to decarbonize or reduce our impact while we work to scale big solutions. And then we prepare. And this takes a lot of forms too. And so adaptation involves actions and investment that reduce our exposure to the increasing climate change related risks. And so ultimately, to kind of wrap up with this opportunity, as we think about climate action planning and what does that mean, climate change is our opportunity to multi-solve. It's able to think about the things that are broken, that aren't working well, or that we wish worked better, and think about not only how to make them better, but to make them better for the climate and make them better for the community. And so there are lots of places where we have co-benefits, multitudes of co-benefits. There can be actions that reduce emissions, help build resilience or help us prepare, and also help, say, fix broken systems like our transit or providing more bike lanes or you name it. So these are the kind of conversations that we can be having and putting the climate action plan in this broader context of what is our vision for our shared community and how do we make that a climate friendly one, but also that is addressing all sorts of other issues that we know we're confronting as a small community and also as a larger community. So how can we use this as an opportunity to address social, economic, and environmental stressors that we experience in our small little community and also through that sort of nested system that I spoke about earlier. And so this is the point, and one that there's still a lot of confusion around. I actually had an elected official just ask this question, so I'm going to say this quote. It may not be that relevant here, but as we think about our climate action plan, we know very clearly from the science that any further delay in concerted, anticipatory global action on adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. This was a key message from one of the most recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Summary for Policymaker reports, and I think that's really important. We are no longer in a position as a global society to be talking about mitigation or adaptation. It is both. It's no longer either or. And so as we think about our community and our plan, I can't stress enough that we need to be thinking about how we reduce our contribution to the problem, but also shape and share that vision for how to prepare for the change we know we've set in motion. And so my question to you all, as we embark on this bold effort to continue progress in this space, is will we embrace the opportunity? And I will stop there. And if you have questions, comments, or concerns, I will be around to answer them. And you can also find more information on our website or send me an email or tweet at me. I will not be fast if you tweet at me, but I will respond eventually. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Heidi. Really appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out today. We really appreciate it. My name is Shane Stennis. I'm the Director of Sustainability here on the Twin Cities campus. And I just wanted to say two things. One is Hannah and Yasui in the back of the room, if you can wave to everyone. They have note cards. If you have questions, they're going to walk around, hand out note cards. Feel free to jot them down. Questions about Heidi's presentation, questions about things that Bill and Brian had said, or things that I'm going to cover, or our panel will cover later. Please write them down. We'll collect those note cards as we progress through the activities today, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can. My role really today is to provide a little bit of an overview about climate action planning, what it entails, and what's the history behind it at the institution. So with that in mind, what I'll start off by saying is climate action planning is really just developing a strategy map, a roadmap, if you will, for us as an institution about how we're going to reduce and mitigate our greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. So the things that happen on our campus or that we are responsible for, that we cause because we exist. We teach classes, we conduct research, we send athletes and students on study abroad trips or for competition. Those sorts of things we're trying to mitigate. The other thing that climate action plans often entail is the other piece that Dr. Roop spoke about, which is really that adaptation and resilience building. Knowing that we have climate change impacts that are going to occur, regardless of what happens, that we need to prepare for those, because unlike other organizations, we can't move. We are fixed in a particular time and place, and so we are bound to this location here on the Mississippi River in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and so any climate change impacts that are going to materialize here, we really can't escape. So we have to make ourselves more resilient to them and prepare for them. The other thing that you often see in climate action plans for higher education institutions, and that we've addressed in prior ones, is a real focus on how are we incorporating climate change into curriculum and research and extension and outreach activities. So I expect that all those things and perhaps many more will be part of our climate action planning process here as this unfolds and as we move forward. And we are, I just want to emphasize, not alone in this. There are many other higher education institutions that are doing climate action planning on their campuses and that we exchange knowledge and information with and benefit from learning from each other. So we're part of something called the Climate Leadership Network. It is organized by a group called Second Nature, which is a nonprofit out of Boston. And they collect and organize and catalyze pledges and commitments by higher education institutions to address climate change. We've been a signatory of this group since 2008. So we have a long-standing commitment around climate action and climate protection here at the institution, and it's across our system. We have all 5 campuses are participating in this, and we've incorporated our research and outreach centers in some of the work as well. And we're part of something called the Carbon Commitment, which is really focused on that mitigations piece, but we've also got campuses like Morris that are focused on resilience building as well. And like I said, just because we're signatory to one commitment doesn't mean we can't incorporate things like resilience and adaptation into our work. So there are, just for reference, about 420 current members and signatories to the Second Nature Climate Leadership Commitments. And so we exchange information and knowledge with that group really actively and often as we go through our process, and have already been talking to members of this group as we prepare for the upcoming climate action planning. And we, like I said, have done climate action work at the institution before. This is not our first time engaging in this effort and engaging in this type of activity. So as I mentioned before, we signed the climate leadership commitments in 2008, and the Twin Cities campus published its very first climate action plan in 2011. That plan identified a number of strategies that we would take to cut our emissions by about 50% by 2021, by this last year. And we also addressed in that planning document strategies around research and teaching and how we were going to incorporate, or how we were incorporating, climate change into our core mission activities as well. And I'm really happy to say, like, we hit our goal, right? We have cut our emissions 51% over the last 12 years as an institution, which is not a small undertaking. And I know relative to the scale of the challenge, we need to move faster and more quickly. But I think we should also take a moment to stop and recognize that there aren't many institutions in the US that can say this. I think the number that we got from Second Nature is, of all the signatories, about 9 schools have hit 50% or greater in their planning process. So it's a pretty big deal. And it's credit to all the university students and faculty and staff who are really working on this actively day in and day out. This is a team effort, right? So that, kind of makes us think about, like, where are we at, right? What does that 50% mean, and where are we at? Well, as Dr. Roop pointed out, our emissions are not much different than the emissions of the planet as a whole in terms of the sources. Most of our emissions come from the energy we consume for a variety of activities, whether that is heating buildings, could be the electricity we purchased to power lights and this screen and my computer right now, and certainly in the transportation sector, the air travel that we undertake and the commuting that happens every day on campus for all of our university community. Those are the primary drivers of our carbon footprint, our emissions as a campus. And so that's really, from a mitigation standpoint, what we're focused on and the things that we'll be addressing and really working on through this climate action planning process is how do we solve for these? How do we begin to address some of these emission sources? So with that, I am gonna stop there and I am gonna invite up Dr. Jessica Hellman, who is the Executive Director of the Institute on the Environment. She's gonna lead a panel discussion with some of our committee members from the Twin Cities Campus Sustainability Committee, and I'll let them take it away and talk about some of the committee's work and their perspectives on this upcoming work that's ahead.
As we get settled, I'll reiterate Shane's request that if people have questions or comments on anything that they've heard, feedback so far, please write that on a card. I know these collections of these cards as one form of feedback is important and valued by the folks who have shared work with you today. You guys are so far away.
Yeah, do you want, I can move. I can move.
I know, well. Thank you.
Yes,
Makes me feel less lonely.
Yes. Hold on, Jacob.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I am Jessica Hellman, as Shane just said. I'm the director of the Institute on the Environment. I'm also a professor in the Department of Ecology, Evolution, and Behavior. And I have the great privilege of sharing these individuals with you all. We have 4 representatives from the Twin Cities Sustainability Committee who are going to talk with us about what motivates them, how they see their role in the committee, what they're seeking to achieve, what's happening so far, things like this. So these are precisely the folks who will be helping to steer the creation of climate action planning and other activities around the intersections in the Impact 2025 ambition in the strategic plan. So I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves one by one. I have a set of questions that I'd like to spend maybe 20 minutes discussing with you guys, or having each of you give your answers to them. And then we'd like to turn it to questions that you have. So again, note cards. Thank you. Please write your questions. They'll make their way up to me, and we'll extend it to things that the audience would like to talk about. And I even have a few pre-audience submitted questions too, if we need them too. All right. So I have an order of operations here. So I'll start with you, Jacob Bechtel. Would you be willing to go first, introduce yourself, and maybe tell us a little bit about why you're on this committee or how you got here?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Jacob. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a junior here studying industrial and systems engineering. The things I'm involved with on campus is I actually work at the Institute on the Environment as a student worker. I work in like the energy programs and Ecolab scholarships, and then I'm a part of this committee, and I am the, I guess now, former president of 365 Green. And the way I got involved in this committee is I just got an email and applied and was lucky enough to get selected. So I've been a part of this committee since the fall, and yeah.
Busy, busy. All right, Catherine Bruns.
Hi, my name is Catherine Bruns. I'm a PhD candidate in communication studies, and I study environmental communication. I also have the absolute privilege of being a research assistant for Dr. Heidi Roop. She's fantastic. You should definitely reach out to her. And I got involved with this committee similar to Jacob. I received an email, but I actually believe that the email I received might have been from you, Jessica, because I think I serve on the University of Minnesota Water Council. And I believe that you sent an email out saying we should really have some people with water expertise on the Sustainability Committee. So I volunteered, and here I am.
That's great. I think that's also one of the reasons why you're here with us today. We're talking about lots of climate things, but other aspects of sustainability are critical too, and interrelated. Patricia Zeck.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. And hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here with all of you today. My name is Patricia Isaac. I am the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Consultant in Central Human Resources. I, like everyone else, also received that email and applied immediately because I firmly believe that we must include all perspectives and all voices in anything that's moving us into the future. It is so important. And I was pleased that I was selected and invited to serve on the committee. I use she, her, ellas pronouns, and my first language was Spanish. And the reason I bring it up is because my parents immigrated to this nation in 1950. And throughout their lives, were just amazed at the ease of everything and how disposable everything was and how wonderful it was here. And only to realize that all of that, we should have stopped it way before. I remember as a child going to Mexico to visit my grandparents and my family members and taking a bag to shop and saving everything and composting and everything that we're all just doing now. And I realized, boy, we have a lot to learn from others, and that's what the perspective I know that many on the committee have, and I want to really just continue to help everyone see that there's so many others out there that have done it better than us, and we have to really include their voices. So that's why I'm here. So thank you, Jessica.
My apologies, Patricia, I mispronounced your last name, even though I do know how to pronounce it.
Oh,
There's
that's
something
quite
about
all right.
standing in front of a microphone. Isaac.
Yes.
Teddy Potter.
Hi, it's nice to be here and nice to be in the presence of the folks in this room and eventually on the recording. My name is Teddy Potter. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a clinical professor with the School of Nursing. I'm also director of planetary health for the school. And I'm part of this committee because climate change presents one of the greatest public health crises we've ever faced. And so adaptation means saving lives. It means being a responsible healthcare provider. And so I bring that community and Minnesota's expertise in healthcare to this conversation.
Terrific. You may have, Teddy, just preempted a little bit of my first question. So maybe I'll ask you first, and you can expand on what you just said. And that is, what is it that inspires or inspired your interest in sustainability and in climate? Maybe there's an extension of that. You can
Yeah,
elaborate.
my interest in climate goes back a long way. I grew up in Minnesota, so I know the land very well. I've played on it. My family has lived here. And I began in the late 1990s, early 2000s to see pattern shifts, and those pattern changes really began to disturb me. I had never seen it rain before on Christmas. The robins always left. They didn't winter over. Flowers bloomed at a certain time. I could count on lilacs and lilies of the valley around Memorial Day, and now, well, not this year, but now you oftentimes see them end of April, beginning of May. And it was like, what is this? And so being a good science background profession, when Inconvenient Truth came out, I went to it to see what is the science telling us, and was quite horrified, and at that point in time became a climate activist. But my activism and my professional role stayed a little separate until around 2014, when the evidence was so overwhelming that the human health impact of climate change was going to be so severe, and already was so severe, that I could no longer not blend those two. And I became a climate activist nurse. More recently, I have pivoted to be a planetary health nurse, in that I'm concerned about climate change, but all the other things that Dr. Roop mentioned: biodiversity loss, our water shortages, our deforestation, our desertification of the land, water, air, water pollution. We now have evidence that microplastics are in our bloodstream. So we have a lot of work to do, and I think it can get done here at the university because we have all the pieces we need to get it done.
Catherine, how about you? What inspired your interest, or still inspires your interest in sustainability and climate?
Unfortunately, fear, to be completely honest. I study issues of water scarcity and security. And what keeps me up at night is the idea of being able to, or not being able to turn on the tap and receive water out of it. I have become very passionate about figuring out ways to help those on the margins, about figuring out ways to, as Heidi has mentioned, to mitigate and to improve and adapt to these changing issues while we still have time. And my background in communication in particular, I think is very relevant and is greatly needed in a conversation as wide-ranging as climate change. The science is undeniable, and yet communicating about this issue is incredibly challenging, particularly for scientists who are shaking people and saying, I don't understand what you don't understand. So what I'm trying to do is figure out a way to kind of bridge the science with the public and actually figure out a way that we can take all of the knowledge that we've gained and transfer it out to the public and hopefully involve people in the conversations as needed and make actual practical changes.
Jacob?
Well, that really struck a chord with me, number one. We need to get a lot of marketing people on climate change because, yeah. But the way I got into sustainability is I'm from Minnesota as well, and I just grew up playing outside and going camping with my family. But really when, like, the big moment for me was I took a trip to the Boundary Waters my junior year of high school. And it sounds a little cheesy, but I had a spiritual moment with a loon. It was just me and a loon in a canoe. And since that time, I've kind of felt a calling to work on sustainability, and I've never really gotten tired of it. And I've met some of my best friends in this world in sustainability work. So those are the people that inspire me to this day. And also a lot of fun to be had in the sustainability space as well.
It's not all doom and gloom. It's community. Patricia, what do you think?
Well, for me, I agree with everything that's been said. But I really, it's the migration that this is going to cause of humans. And we're so unprepared for that on so many levels. And that concerns me. And it's because we're not the best when it comes to truly being inclusive and welcoming and how we're going to deal with it in an equitable manner. All of these things really concern me. That's the work I do. So for me, it's the coming together of these two that is so overwhelming that we have to do everything we can to get a handle on it. So, thank you.
Well, I'll start with you then again, Patricia, if you wouldn't. And maybe maybe you'll pick up on this theme. I'm curious what each of you represent sort of different parts of the university. You have different lived experiences, different professional stages. So what are you hearing from the people that you are connected to on campus that you think needs to be part of or needs to be appreciated and understood in, let's just say, in the climate action planning process? We'll narrow it from all of sustainability specifically to climate action. What are you hearing from the people that you're interacting with and you understand well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I work in human resources here at Central Human Resources. But I'm also very involved with the diverse community of practice and partner a lot with the Office for Equity and Diversity. And for me and what I hear from my colleagues is that this has to be approached with a very inclusive fashion, where to the point of marketing, right? We have to make sure that we reach the broadest audience, that we translate if we need to translate, that we bring experts that represent all of the communities that we want to be sure to include. And it's just, it becomes so crucial to have the perspectives, because if we don't, then we will be solving a problem that is supposed to help everyone. And it goes back to that saying, right? Nothing about me is for me without me. And unless we have them at the table, or at least as part of the focus groups or whatever it is, the path that we're going to choose, we will be missing incredible input from individuals that will probably be affected first and foremost, as Dean Burr alluded to earlier.
Great.
Thank you.
Jacob?
Yeah, I totally agree. The main thing that I've kind of been focused on is getting the right people in the decision-making process. So the main thing so far that I've focused on is getting students involved. So to all you students out there, reach out to me. I'd love to be a voice for you. And then also like underrepresented communities, when we make this plan, making sure that they're in the room and like given the respect and like power to speak up and say what they need. But for me personally as well, I think the U is a good example for the state, and a lot of people look to what the U's doing to see how Minnesota is doing as a whole. So I think we can lead by example as well. And then last but certainly not least, solving social issues. That's a huge part of climate change, climate justice. I think the main issue on campus right now is like living wages and equitable jobs. So I think all of that is connected in this process.
Great. Catherine, what are your networks and people you know particularly well at the U telling you?
Well, I absolutely echo everything that's been said. I think that I'll take this question in a little bit of a more practical position. So I think there are two big, action items that I'm hearing from people in my circles. The first is, from a sustainability and water perspective, I'm hearing a lot of conversation and desire to address stormwater issues. That is something that I only recently became familiar with, and yet we have a lot of pavement around all the University of Minnesota campuses, and we need to find ways that when it rains and we have all of that water, where does it go? And what do we do with all of the gross stuff that accompanies that water and has come off of, all of our sidewalks and pavement and those sorts of things? And I think from a sustainability perspective, that absolutely needs to be, a top priority. From more of a climate perspective, I also, as a graduate student, as soon as I arrived on campus, the first thing everyone was talking about was transportation. Parking is expensive, bus passes are expensive. So I think that there's a desire to kind of address the economics of that, but also I think the pandemic has provided a really unique opportunity for us to reframe even our transportation needs overall. Is it always necessary that we come to campus and use the energy in these buildings? Are there things that could be done remotely instead? And are there other ways that we could, instead of making parking more affordable, can we improve our other transportation options and make them more sustainable and more climate friendly, and address that issue from an alternative perspective? So that's what I got.
Cards are still being passed around. Soon a time will come where I will ask for questions that come from the cards. Please, if you have something you would like to say or contribute, this is a wonderful opportunity to do so. Teddy, what's your network telling you?
First and foremost, any solution has to be an equitable and just solution. We oftentimes hear people say we're all in the same boat with climate change, and we aren't. We're all in the same sea, but very different boats. And so some people have many advantages, and like Dr. Roop said, will be able to relocate. Others will not be able to relocate. They haven't even been able to relocate off of the I-94 corridor, which causes terrible asthma, respiratory issues. So we need to make sure that every solution going forward is equitable and just. Our students are really demanding change, so this is not time for a Band-Aid approach. I hear calls to address unjust economic models, structures of racism, old patterns of colonization, patterns of extraction. People want to know that this is going to be cut off at its roots, that we are going to not be perpetuating this pattern that's gotten us into this problem to begin with, and that we have to dismantle all those structures and recreate a better narrative in its place. I will say that I want to mention the special sort of situation of eco-anxiety and despair, and a really existential crisis of, are we going to make it? And if you read the reports, it is dubious. We're sort of on a razor's edge, but the message that I don't want people to walk away with is it's pointless to try, or that we're too small to make things happen. I think students often hear that the only way we're going to move anything forward is policy changes, and then you see government, sort of gridlocked and not making changes. And so there's a sense of we're not going to get out of this. Individual actions also can have an impact. As a matter of fact, a report just released last year by Project Drawdown, which is our science-based solution project in this country, which really talks about how to draw down greenhouse gases, said 25 to 30% of greenhouse gases can be drawn down by individuals working together on solutions. So at the university, we need to tackle, yes, stop the water that's pouring into the bathtub, but we need to also figure out, how do we build a better society? How do we build better cities, better transportation, new pharmaceuticals that don't have such a huge impact? How do we produce locally? How do we look at our agricultural structures? Everything has to be examined and redesigned for the future.
I agree. I think it's a really important point to think about a university community as a really useful intersection between society and systems and individual action. It's kind of the scale at which we can work collaboratively to affect something that's larger than us individually, but is the sum of individual contributions. So it can be a very important scale for change. Okay, this committee was relatively recently sort of reconstituted. There have been versions of committees like this in the past. But associated with Impact 2025, it just recently came to be. There are other committees on other campuses. There's also a system-wide committee. So I'm going to ask you about how your time on the committee is going, but I feel like I need to acknowledge that it hasn't been terribly long. But and I'll also add, each of you comes with your lived experiences, the networks and people that you know, your expertise. But maybe there's also something you've learned, something new that you've already experienced by being on this committee. So how's it going? Patricia.
Oh, okay, me first. All right, no pun intended, but I love the energy of the committee. And it's hard, no, really. And it's interesting because this is the first time we've met in person. We have been in our little rectangular world, and I still feel the energy. And to Teddy's point, that one person can make a change, and just trying to really convey that to the greater audience is really going to be our job, I think, somehow, and with the right communication and involving the students here on campus. But I think we're poised. I think we really are. I think we forget that as the institution here at the University of Minnesota is in a really good place to do excellent work around this topic. And I say that because we sit in a climate that I think is going to, because of where it is, it has the opportunity. We have the 4 seasons, we can feel it, we can see it, it's affecting our world in a very different way. And I think that I've really enjoyed. The other thing is I didn't realize some of the reports that exist, because this is not my world, and I'm just amazed at the amount of information that's out there. And I'm so glad that we have individuals on the committee who know exactly what to do with it and to bring it to everyone's level. So yes, the energy and the knowledge is just outstanding. So,
Jake, you want to go next?
So, I mean, the main thing I've learned is, I don't know how many weeks ago it was, but we're given a presentation on the U of M's plan for development and all the buildings and classrooms and changes that are going to happen on campus, even 30 years out. So the fact that they're already planning for that was news to me, which honestly means that we've got work to do soon, because that infrastructure is going to be around for a long time. That was the main thing I learned. I think we're set up pretty well as a committee. And I'm happy that we're doing things like this to get more students involved. Yeah.
Great. Catherine?
I will kind of expand on something that I think Patricia has already commented on, which is I was floored by the amount of data that exists. I am primarily a qualitative researcher, and so I was shocked when we started, particularly working on the STARS report, and seeing how many things have been tracked, how long they have been tracked, how many numbers there are. There are so many numbers. And it's fantastic because it means that we don't have questions. We have answers. We just need to take that information and put it into action. And so a lot of the hard work has already been done. We know what we have to do. We just have to do it. And something that I think that our committee is working on moving forward is taking all of that data and creating more of a narrative and a story and making it all more transparent and easily accessible to the public. Because if I'm a communication person studying the environment and climate change and sustainability and I didn't know about this stuff, well then we got problems. So I think that moving forward, that is, the number one task is taking this information and crafting a story.
Teddy?
Yeah. I would say something very similar in that we are not going to solve this one discipline alone. I'm very pleased with the committee and the group of people that have been assembled, but I think, shoot, why didn't I know about you? You're doing wonderful work. Why didn't I know about this? And so it really gets to your point of communicating. And how do we do that? It's certainly going out in emails and publications and posters, et cetera, but somehow it's not sinking into us as a culture, that we have a culture of sustainability, and all of us are doing it, and we're bringing our research strengths and our teaching strengths and our service strengths to the table to make this happen. That message has to be so deep and so obvious and so apparent that we actually lure students away from other schools and faculty away from other schools because something's happening at the U.
You are one of the most connected people on campus that I know. So the fact that you're walking into a sustainability setting and finding other little boxes of people you didn't know already is I think encouraging. Good, but that's great to hear. Okay, I'm going to get some questions here that are not pre-prepared, but there is one more pre-prepared important question that I think we need everybody to hear your answers to, and that is, what do other people in the university community, so this is a committee, it's limited in size, it has a wide diversity of participation, but it needs to draw upon the community broadly. How do members of the university community support, interact with you, play their role in promoting sustainability, all of the above? Any thoughts? We'll go in, who has a thought first, rather than going in a particular category?
I have three very specific ways to get involved, and they are specific to undergraduate and graduate students. The first thing that I would recommend if you're interested in getting involved in sustainability and climate change is enroll in the many, many classes that are offered at the University of Minnesota relating to sustainability and climate change. Institute on the Environment has a range. There are Grand Challenge curriculum courses, Akara Changemakers labs. There are many opportunities for you to draw upon all of your disciplinary skills and address an actual problem related to sustainability and the environment that links to your campus and local community. So I would highly suggest taking a look at those courses because we need people from a variety of fields and majors. Second, vote in all of your campus elections. We get the emails. We do not always read them because we get a lot of emails. But pay attention to who is running for Student Senate. Pay attention to who is running for COGS. Make sure that you are placing a ballot for people who are placing, climate change and sustainability at the forefront of their platforms. Those are the people that you want advocating for you. Those are the people that you want in the rooms with university administration. And then the last thing that I would say, and I think today is a wonderful example, show up. And I know that we hear that all the time, and we have a very active and engaged campus community, particularly for students. But it is absolutely critical that you show up to events like this, that you apply for internships related to climate change and sustainability, that you apply for grants and funding opportunities. Because if we are not engaging in those opportunities, they will go away. And the best thing that we can be doing right now is placing pressure on the administration and reminding them that the graduate students and undergraduate students and faculty and staff care very deeply about this issue and are prioritizing it, and that the university and campus should as well.
Anybody else have something you want to say about community engagement?
I can go. I guess building off of that, quick plug for work. just check out the Institute on the Environment's website. There's a bunch of like classes and opportunities, and then specifically right now for all the students, there's the Clean Energy Leaders Program open for application right now. Awesome program, you should apply. Some people in this audience are in it, I can see. But in general, I think the biggest impact we can all have is just using your network and your friends and like telling them that you care about sustainability, about what's going to happen on campus, and just having like powerful, meaningful conversations with them. It's tough if you put all of the responsibility on your like individual actions. So I think working on making connections, joining groups, committees, and like influencing other people is the best way you can have the biggest impact. And then also specifically to get involved with the committee. I mean, there's a bunch of QR codes up on this this thing to stay updated, but also all of you are welcome to reach out to me anytime, and I'd love to talk and learn from you about what you think that you should do.
I'd like to add, take a Grand Challenge course, or 1 or 3 or 5 or 8, because you're learning an important skill set, and that is how to work in a transdisciplinary world. And you'll be learning from your colleagues, but also from faculty that hold different positions. And how do we do this? How do we solve these grand challenges? So I would urge you to do that. And then as a student, you've got tons of power. You might not realize it, but you've got lots and lots of power. So hold your faculty accountable. Are they teaching about climate change? Are they teaching about adaptation? Are they teaching you the skills that you will need to know to build the better world that we know we have to build and build quickly? And if you're not getting that, bring it up. I might have faculty colleagues at my door saying, why the heck did you say that? But that you do have power. We do respond to evaluations. We do look at student feedback. The deans look at all of that. So if you feel that you have not been prepared and you're not getting what you need to be working in the world that we're calling for, we need to hold the curriculum accountable and the faculty accountable.
Okay, so Teddy, I'm going to reflect that back at you, and I'm going to ask all of you to comment on this. I've got a bunch of cards here on courses and what is being taught in the classroom and the accessibility of sustainability content in a classroom setting. So some of this is about, some of this content is in science classes, but it's not outside of science classes. Another question says, certainly climate and sustainability related classes aren't obligatory. So how do students access this content if they're not choosing, if they're not specializing in this area or signing up for those 10 Grand Challenge classes? Let's start with that. What do you guys think about curriculum and the penetration of sustainability content in the way our curriculum is organized?
I've actually done this, so I can start out the conversation. I think we need to realize that every course needs to have content. I think you can do it in different ways. Math certainly applies, physics applies, dance and arts and all the humanities apply. So making sure that our courses have that content. As I said, the Grand Challenge courses are important. But I would say, again, the student voice. So in healthcare, we were not having climate embedded in our curriculum. We went to the deans and there wasn't a lot of action. So we went to the students and we said, are you going to need to know how to practice in a climate changed world? Is this going to be important for contact for you? And they said, absolutely. 90% of the students surveyed said, absolutely, we need this content. And we said, how much of this content are you getting in medical school, nursing school, pharmacy, public health, et cetera? And it was a fraction, like 5%. And so then we were able to take that information to the deans and say, our customers, our consumers, the people we're serving are not getting what they need. And that mobilized the deans. We were able to choose a climate champion for every health professional school at the university, and we designed climate change curriculum, which is now open access. Anybody in the university can get their hands on that. What are the health impacts related to climate change? And it's being used around the world because other schools aren't doing it. So it's open access. If you want to know about this, if your friends want to know about it, it's on the website of the Center for Global Health and Social Responsibility.
I'm not a panelist, but I'm going to add. I think also we have the whole academy, including the University of Minnesota, has been evolving in our thinking about this. So even here at the U, it's multiple colleges collaborate. The Institute on the Environment helps execute the Sustainability Studies program. That was innovative, still is very important. It layers on top of whatever degree you're pursuing to give you sustainability training. But now, in addition to that, we see the importance of sustainability across the curriculum. So you don't need to be a sustainability studies major or a minor in order to encounter sustainability content all across the university. So we need these different layers. Patricia,
If I
what would you
may,
say?
I believe this is going to be something that the employer of the future is going to look for in who they hire. It's very similar to individuals who go and do extra work and get a certificate on diversity and equity, social justice. These are necessary skills for the future. And I think while you're here at the institution, if you can gather as much of that as you can, insist from your departments to provide it for you, I think you would become that skilled employee of the future that will be sought after.
No, you go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say a quick thing too. Like I'm an industrial systems engineer. My major has nothing to do with sustainability, but it's also about how you market yourself, like what you do outside of the classroom. And a lot of the programs are flexible enough that you can find either liberal education or like technical electives that somehow have something to do with sustainability. So I think if you put your heart to it and like use your resources, talk to your advisors, every degree you could market it as, yes, I'm a marketing major, but I'm going to do sustainability with that.
Catherine?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on one of the things that you said when you first started listing out the questions, which is, well, what happens when we take class and it doesn't have some of the science in it? And I will say, as someone in communication, I encounter that a lot. And so for faculty and staff who are perhaps designing these courses and things that I've been considering when I've been designing my own courses, is that we have a responsibility to build in those foundations into our course designs and make sure that we are assessing students' prior knowledge, not just for gaps, but also for correcting misunderstandings and misperceptions about the science of climate change and sustainability. We don't always know the backgrounds of our students who are going to be in our classes, so they could be from all ranges of disciplines. They might all be from our disciplines, and they might have had some rocky years where they, some of the knowledge didn't sink in. That has happened to me before. So every single class, you have a responsibility to make sure that everyone is on the same page at the beginning, and that's an easy change that you can make when you're considering how to redesign your class.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, this card is related to a topic that has come up already, and that is about representation and about inclusion of people who will be on the front lines of the consequences of climate and other sustainability challenges. So, and furthermore, as a university community, we are a community of students and staff and faculty, but we're also a broader Twin Cities community, state of Minnesota community. So what do you think about people off campus, groups not formally represented when we think of the university perhaps, or formulated this committee and its composition? How do those other people get involved or participate in what the university does around sustainability? What are your particular thoughts? And I understand each of you, by the way, is not necessarily speaking for the committee as a whole, but because I think committee's undoubtedly going to need to grapple with this question.
Well, I hope that eventually the committee will be able to present outside of the university or invite the community to the university to hear. I mean, to hear Heidi's presentation, I think would be just amazing. And then to come and hear what the students are doing and how we're changing curriculum to meet, and really be in the 21st century and the challenges that we're facing. I think it's really important to include the community. We represent, we're public servants here. We're here for the community and we're here for our students, so definitely.
Jacob, what do you think?
I can,
Go ahead,
oh,
yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, my
No,
bad.
I
Okay.
don't- yeah.
So I would like to comment on something that I've actually learned just this semester by working with, once more, Dr. Heidi Roop, which is the idea of knowledge transfer. So I think in academia, we tend to approach all of our kind of solutions from this very top-down approach. Like, we have all of this knowledge in the university system, and we are going to continue producing scholarship and findings in these very structured ways that we always have, and we're going to disseminate it from a top-down perspective into the communities. And I think that we really need to reimagine that and remember that there are people in these communities who have knowledge and solutions and practices and adaptations related to climate change and sustainability. They themselves have all of these things. We don't need to go into them and say, well, look at all this stuff that we're doing. We, as Patricia has said, need to do a better job at involving those community members, at asking them what they are already doing, at asking them what they would like to see from us, at making sure that we have a complete picture, instead of assuming that we are filling in the gaps because we're academics, and that's what academics do. We can do a better job at fleshing out what this larger problem looks like and making sure that we are addressing the problems that need to be addressed both within and outside of the university.
Who are the communities you're talking about? I feel like you're speaking kind of vaguely about these communities outside of the university, but I'm really curious to hear who exactly you're talking about.
Catherine, what is your particular take on that?
So I would say, personally, I just became a homeowner in St. Louis Park, and I love St. Louis Park. And St. Louis Park, I think, does excellent communication with its residents. And my responsibility and my commitment for this next year is to become more involved with, a first-ring suburb like St. Louis Park, and taking the information, the expertise that I have garnered in my own classes and in experiences like this committee, and figuring out ways to kind of involve other people, my neighbors, my city representatives, and making sure that they have the information, and also hearing from my own city, what are the gaps in St. Louis Park's climate action plan? We as a city have our own plan. We have our own strategies for improving resilience and infrastructure, and finding better ways to kind of involve those people, like local representatives, my own neighbors, once again, in that communication, kind of going both ways, I think is a good starting point.
Patricia, do you want to add to specificity what you?
Yes,
your
thank you for
thoughts?
the question. I would like for us to not forget to focus on the lower socioeconomic communities that we have here in the greater, Twin Cities area, as well as our rural communities. I think as climate changes, they're the ones who are going to feel it first and foremost. If you live in an apartment building and all of a sudden our grid can't support the heating or the air conditioning, which for many it's already that, we need to be able to create creative solutions or try and help that. We also have a culture here in Minnesota, and I'm not originally from Minnesota, but in our rural communities, our cabins and the agriculture and the farming communities, they're going to feel it. They're going to feel it first, I think, in many, many ways. And I want to make sure that those are the communities that we really include. I think it's going to be, by including them, they're going to bring us to a challenge that's going to be more important on a certain level for us to solve. And I hope that that's what we're going to be doing. I hope that answers your question.
Another particular community, if we, that the university has responsibilities given historic truths about what happens here and the fact that the university even sits on land of the Dakota people, would be indigenous communities, Dakota and Anishinaabe, which reminds me also to say that I have lots of cards, and many of them have really good ideas, specific ideas on them, and call out specific communities, particular structural ideas, and people who deserve and need consideration in the community's deliberations. So these cards are going to be content that you're all going to need to look at and consider, and I trust will be the case. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question. I'm only going to have time for maybe two of you to chime in so you could negotiate who that might be. What is the most urgent thing that you think the university needs to reduce our climate impact? There is much work to do. What do you see as some of the top priorities or largest barriers, biggest issues?
I think we need to get a student perspective.
Yeah? Jacob, what do you think?
Jeff, I don't mean to throw it, but I really believe that's.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jacob.
If one of you has an answer, I'd like to think for a little bit.
I'll just go back to one that I said earlier, which is transportation. I mean, I think we saw
Yeah.
that. I think we saw that in the chart that Heidi put up. I mean, that's a significant portion of our footprint, and I think that's low hanging fruit to start combating.
The one I saw, not just to give you more time, Jacob, the heating of our buildings.
Yep, cold climate.
And I thought, I mean, could we just condense a little? And for the next 2 years, only use certain buildings? I don't know. So I don't have any authority or anything like that. But it just seems like if I was solving something at home, and I remember growing up in Chicago, the house, there was a real, we called it the cold room. And in the winter, we just shut that room, we just didn't use the cold room, right? And it was a bedroom. So that meant that we had to rearrange sleeping during the winter. And it was fine, it was the cold room, right? So I think that there's things that we can do here that hopefully we will be addressing.
It's also, Dr. Roop talked about all the different strategies and sort of portfolio of things that are needed to address and opportunities to address doing climate planning, mitigation, and adaptation. Shane talked about the 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that has happened so far. That's spectacular, something to celebrate, but it gets harder. The low-hanging fruit gets addressed first, and some of the centrally controlled things. So increasingly, it is about how each of us shows up at the university, how the university is organized so that we can each show up in a sustainable fashion. So it gets harder. Bill? Yes. You're up. I want to show you this one card.
Can I answer the question really quickly?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
You're done thinking.
So I'm
Yes.
gonna miss some things, but because I'm on the spot here, but I think like waste management is something that we can work on. I know there's a lot of like workers issues with that, along with like how effective our waste management policies are currently and how effectively like students and faculty dispose of their waste in the correct manners. But then also I think just like accountability for like even whatever our committee decides to do or what the university has already committed to, like how is the university going to be held accountable for actually reaching those goals and actually doing the things that they say they're going to do?
And I just want to add that for me, the biggest thing we need to change is the culture so that sustainability becomes everybody's everyday work and that it's not a magic bullet that one organization, one committee, one group, one administrator is going to solve. Every single one of us has to embrace this.
Well, speaking as a faculty member who is deeply committed to the practice and the knowledge and the pursuit and all things sustainability, I'm just grateful for the work that you all are doing.
Before this ends, I think there's a lot of people in this audience who came here expecting that this would be more of a town hall format where we would actually be able to present you with concerns, ideas we have. Just speaking personally, coming out of this, I don't have any understanding of what you all have worked on really concretely, like what the climate action plan looks like. I'm a member of the Teamsters Union on campus. We have a lot of questions and concerns about what this looks like moving forward for workers that we were hoping we would be able to present today. So I think there's a lot of people in this audience who would agree, like, moving forward, is there a way we can actually have dialogue? Because this was not a dialogue. You know, the questions were put on cards and Shane sort of, I don't know if people agree in the audience with me, but
I agree.
I think we need like a much more inclusive dialogue here because this is not working. And the workers on campus are not represented here. Students are not really represented the way they should be. So I don't know if you have a response to that. I think a lot of other people in this audience would agree with me on that. So
I have one response, and then I'm going to turn it over to Bill because he will probably have more to say about that. My one response would be that we're very early. And also to acknowledge and appreciate your comment that a town hall and town halls can and should have dialogue. And so I would certainly, I'm not a member of this committee. I'm a very committed, interested party in this committee. But I would expect there to be many more opportunities for interaction. The committee is quite early in its creation.
Are there things that we can,
So I'm gonna turn it over to Bill.
like, commit to right now? Because we have a lot of the committee here, so.
Yeah, go for it.
No.
Co-chair.
Okay, great, thank you. As Jessica had mentioned, this is really an awareness that our committee is moving from the STARS work, which was the self-assessment I mentioned, to climate action planning. We haven't really started yet. What we're doing is giving the framework, giving the awareness for people to know this is the next thing we're going to be tackling. It doesn't happen in a meeting, and I realize we need more opportunities, but think about this work taking place over the next year and a half. So some of what you're referring to is how do people engage? How do you give comments? How do you keep up with what's going on? That's part of what our committee is going to be creating. So the mechanisms you're referring to, we're just not there yet. So I realize that people have a lot of passion and input and suggestions, and we want to get those. But for today's town hall, we're just announcing a kickoff. We talked a little bit about the climate. I think people are on board, but why is it important? What are you doing? How are you going to approach it? Well, you saw we structured a committee. We have committee members that are equal parts, students, faculty, and staff, and this is the mechanism we have in place. So as you want to keep up with what's going on, It All Adds Up is the website that you can go to that will have a couple of things. It'll have this presentation. It has some of the committee's activities that we're working on. It will have some questions. So Shane had said we have a bunch of questions we just don't have time to get to today. We want to be respectful of people's time because we're about at 5:30 now. So we're going to try and answer those questions that we put up on the website as well. So you can also sign up for an email distribution list where you're looking for what's the update this month? What are you working on? Are there other town halls coming up? Are there places I can submit questions or comments? Who can I talk to? That's what we're going to be posting. So we're really early in the process. I appreciate the interest and folks wanting to be engaged. That's exactly what we are hoping for.
So I heard you say you're going to try to answer the questions. Can I get a commitment to actually answer the questions that have been submitted?
Sure. Well, without reading the questions, let me just say that the idea of what we're trying to accomplish as a university, as a state, as a global presence on sustainability isn't new, right? These are things that have been worked on for a long time, and they're hard. If they were easy, we would have done them by now. So some of the questions, we'll have to look at them. Maybe that technology doesn't exist today. Yes, we want to do that. We're driving in the same direction. We just can't, but heating, for example, because I'm in facilities. Why don't we just stop burning fossil fuels tomorrow? Well, there's reasons for that. There's technology issues that have to be solved. There's reliability issues we're working on. People working on it every day. So I don't want to commit that we will answer every question without seeing them. I can tell you where we are. Some of them may be how we'll approach them. But some of them may be really hard to answer in a way that you'll feel like you just nailed it exactly. But I will commit that we will do our best to answer them.
So if you feel like
No, that's not what I said. We will try and answer them the very best we can.
What does that mean? I don't know what that means. I mean, you had people sit here for 90 minutes and none of the questions were answered. I mean,
I highly doubt any of the questions are like very offensive or anything like that, if that's what you're concerned about.
so just to.
Yeah, sure, Brian.
Thanks, Bill. I'll just more quickly, so two things, I mean, and Jessica and I were talking about this, is we'll certainly post the questions, so we'll have those. And then I think your question was simpler perhaps than Bill was making it, that to the questions themselves, we will address each of those questions that were asked today. There may not be an answer, like many things, the answers are slim, but we certainly, have those up available for people to see and review and respond to.
So we can go to the website in 2 weeks and there will be responses to all those questions. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there'll be a response, yes. What that response is depends on, as Bill was saying, we may not have the answer, but we'll say we don't have the answer to that question. We'll examine that with the committee and so on.
So it'll,
We'll respond to.
it all adds up once you'll have a response for every card.
Jessica's reviewing them. If it requires it, you're right,
Yeah,
you know.
some of them are ideas, I think, yeah, I don't see any reason why this couldn't be.
Yeah.
I don't know what the page of responsibility is.
Yeah, I think it's within the limits, as Bill was saying, but I mean, that some of these are probably things, but we can certainly post them and have the response to them.
Agree with that? Are you all for with that?
Yeah, and I'd
Yeah.
like to add too, like,
Yeah.
we don't disappear. Like I'm happy to talk with you after this. I can give you my card. Like, and this is a small section. I mean, you saw the list up there. There's only 4, but there's like over 20 people on this committee. So yeah, like.
And I'm personally interested in hearing what it is that you're concerned about and how it's going to affect you. It's important. I mean, these are the voices that we want to hear. We want to hear everyone. So thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. I really am.
Also, just to mention, I think we're trying to have an Instagram account, which will be a way to interact with the committee. And then also, I would expect future town halls when we're like farther along in the process, like today. Obviously, there wasn't really any actual climate action planning, which I feel like a lot of people showed up expecting that that's what would happen today. But like the committee, pretty much all of us are either full-time students or full-time workers. So like we haven't gotten to that part yet. And obviously it's timely and we're working to get there. But once we are there, I assume that I will be pushing personally to have many town halls like this when we're at that process where the actual questions would be answered of like, yes, we are doing that in this plan. Oh, we should add that to this plan.
Right, good. Well, also, thank you to the committee members and the panelists. We appreciate your insightful and really heartfelt comments that you offered, so I really appreciate that today.
Absolutely. And thanks to Mike and Alex in the back. Appreciate them as well.
Great, thank you. As you mentioned, we're going to be around if you want to talk to us, and I'm sure there's some refreshments out still available. So again, thank you all for coming today.